Hello everybody, welcome to our series on the craft terms glossary, and in this episode we're going to be going over the blanket stitch. And we're going to be exploring the metaphysical act of the blanket stitch. And what does that mean in multi-dimensional realities, in the universe, in the multiverse, in my psyche, in the materials, in upcycling, in regeneration, in decolonization, in our river of culture that is in this flow, this constant flow of change. And so first we want to invite you to craft along with us, and because this is more of a meditative format of sewing. And it's not necessarily focused on the outcome. It's more focused on the process of sewing, where the qualities of hand sewing are really embraced and valued. And so we want to hold space first, right now, to acknowledge the land that we're on. We're on occupied Coast Salish and Duwamish territory in the Pacific Northwest, and we want to also acknowledge the occupied indigenous lands that you're on, if you're watching this. And so as we're here on the land, with the sky above and the sea that surrounds, we want to call on all of our complete ancestors, the complete directions of our ancestors, the elements of earth, water, fire, air, ether, to come into this space, fill this space with their love and their guidance as we move through this process of transformation. And with that, let us erect the flag of the imagination and begin our work today. This is a garment, part of the primary deconstruct series, and this is some long johns, some kid-sized long johns, and and we have these two. We have this thing kind of pinned together. It's also made out of this shirt that was has some screen prints on it. I think it was from Utah. And then we have parts of this yellow shirt that we've been working on, that I've spoken a little bit about before. And we have one of our screen prints on it from the primary deconstruct series. And so we're going to be doing blanket stitches around each of these, just initially before we attach them onto the front of this. So I'm going to be working with this thread. The idea of the primary deconstruct series is that while I am hand making this collection, I'm also sharing the process with you so that I'm multiplying my regenerative effect by sharing my process and opening it up to people, and then also by creating. And this collection will be available when I'm finished. So what I'm gonna do, starting in this blanket stitch, is I'm not going to knot it, because I'm actually going to just hold this thread here, and as I begin to wrap around here, I'm gonna enclose it inside on the edge, because if a knot is not necessary, if it's going to cause bulk in a way that I would rather not then I'm not gonna do it, okay? I'm not gonna knot it. I'm not gonna not knot it, okay? So that was fun. So I enter in from the back, and the thread is coming out the top here, right? I'm gonna go back in. Wait, no, the first stitch, I'm gonna go back into the front. For the first stitch, it's like doing the first stitch of a chain stitch, where you leave a loop, and then from behind, I grab that loop, I go through it, and then I make sure that where they are linked is right on the edge of the material. And the blanket stitch is, one of the reasons it's called the blanket stitch is because you can do it around like the edge. I'm imagining around the edge of like a felt blanket to make the edges strong, to hold the shape of it. When I was a kid, my mom would do it around like fleece blankets, which are a synthetic version of wool fleece, but you could do it around a wool blanket, a wool fleece. Then there's like polyester or acrylic fleece. This is a sweatshirt material. Oh, another thing you might see them around is like another time that I use a blanket stitch is when I'm making a patch. And the patch is usually like a thicker material, like a denim or a canvas or something. And I'll wrap around the edges of the patch before I attach it on, which is a similar situation as this, only it's going to be a decorative applique. So once I've done the first one, now, if I look at the direction, since it's linked, you can see that it's linked in the front. There's the thread from behind is holding it like that, right? So I know that the next direction I want to go is going back around this way because I want to link it. We're going to be doing an alternating stitch. And it's not, you don't have to do it alternating like this, but I'm going to loop it back around here. So that now when I pull it, still pulling it on the edge, you don't have to alternate it, and you don't have to do them this close together, because on a fleece or wool blanket you wouldn't do it this close together because it's not going to really unravel. You're more just doing it to hold it around the edge. But in this situation, I'm going to do it every other one, back and forth, because I want to make them tighter together. And I noticed that when I just go with one direction, it it can start to twist. But if you like lay it in the, when you're doing the loop and as you're tightening it, you can choose like how it's going to position just by like how you tighten it, how you're adjusting the thread and where it's at. So you have to feel it. Feel where it's going to be and where you want to place it. And as we come around. And so yeah, this is what we're gonna do. I was gonna say that this same stitch is also what people use to do bound buttonholes. Only they don't do the, well, they might do the alternating. To do a hand bound buttonhole. That's something we might, that would be a fun video to make. So keep a lookout for the bound buttonhole in our craft terms glossary. Alright, so what are the metaphysical qualities of, and this whole time you can see I've been holding this thread behind here, so it's been interlocking, and see on the edge it's just skin. It's going every other one, wrapping back and forth. So, what are the metaphysical qualities of the blanket stitch? Well, it's like wrapping around, thoroughly wrapping around the surface of something, whether it's on the around the outside like this, or on the buttonhole would be around the inside of a cut. So it's usually something enclosed, although it doesn't have to be. You could just go around the edge of a material. But in reference to a blanket, usually it's just going around the surface of something. And so it's not necessarily about joining anything together. It's more about, you know, like a running stitch might be joining two materials together, or a joining stitch would be joining two materials. But a blanket stitch, usually if there's more than one material, they're already joined, and you're just enclosing it. Like it could be, I've used it as a way to do like a hand done serging. When you think of serging, it's kind of the same thing, only you have like 3 to like 5 different threads going through a machine, and they're all like overlocking each other to create like the threads to finish the edge of the material, so it's not gonna come unraveled. It's called a finish, so that something is somewhat finished, like it's held in place. Finished relative to what? Like the lifetime of the garment? Because sometimes the thread outlasts the fabric, sometimes the fabric outlasts the thread. But then who's to say, like, You know, if the thread's falling apart, do you just sew the material back together, or do you you could, if that's what's being called for, or you could just let it fall apart and you could recreate something else out of it, out of the pieces, if it's wanting to come into a new form. And so yeah, the blanket. So a blanket, it would be something that keeps us warm, something that keeps us cozy. If it's enclosing the edge of the material, it's like usually people who use blankets are sleeping at night. So there's an aspect of closing our eyes, enclosing the edges of the material. The material world is like closed up. And we enter into our interior world. And in a sense, with sewing and our deep thoughts, we can enter into our material world. I mean, our interior world, and our material world. It's where they meet, okay? It's where they meet. It's where the interior and material meet. It's right here in the blanket stitch. That's what I'm trying to say. And what happens when these two meet? Could this be an aspect of when native science or native feminism, when it calls for reconnecting, when they call for reconnecting the mind with the body, is this a way to do it? And in the blanket stitch, how is this revealing the wisdom? Just in the simple act. The simple act of doing something and sharing this information, and then through the act and the experience of doing this emerges our each an own relationship and experience of what this is for each of us. So I'd love to hear about what this is for you. If you're listening, I'd love to see anything that you're creating. And I know, okay, this is a really tiny blanket. But it's like relative, okay? It's like a blanket for my finger. Or maybe when I stitch this on here, because this is kind of like the placket of the shirt, maybe I'll leave a little opening so you could be a blanket for a flower. Or it could be a blanket for, well, it's funny because then it's like a pocket. It's interesting because like you do the blanket stitch and then you sew it onto something and then it becomes a pocket. All of a sudden it's a pocket then. And pocket for what? A pocket for your sunshine. A pocket for your eraser. A pocket for your acorn. A pocket for your flower. What is the blanket of the earth? I'm thinking about grass. grass roots. All the grasses and the roots. Have you ever tried to dig up grass? Well, I did that and I realized why they called it grass roots, because they're all so interconnected. It's like scalping the face of the earth. Because like there's one, okay, if there's just one grass root, that's just one grass root. You pull it out. But no, they're like these rhizomes that are like all over, interlocked, connected, and so it becomes its like own fiber. In this sense, it's this like metaphor of a blanket. The blanket for the soils. And I think there's different types of grasses. There's different ways to honor that blanket, because there's the blanket that the biosphere would materialize for itself, for a bioregion or something. But then there's the blanket of like the fertilized grass with the white picket fence and like the allotted single family occupant homes, and this idea of individualism and separation. And here we have like two individual blankets on the blanket. And what are they revealing to us? They're revealing to us that there's like two red balls descending downwards. Two red balls descending downwards. And maybe that's all it takes. To become rooted once again. To reach beyond the white picket fence. To regenerate community. What are these two red balls descending downwards? Well, right now this one of them is like I'm holding, it's going in the other direction. So right now what's happening is they're going in two different directions, and I am stitching the blanket stitch around the edge. Thinking about what will this pocket hold? What will be wrapped in this blanket? You know, even if it's tiny, even if it's however long this blanket stitch is taking, the tiniest, noticing these tiny things in my mind, focusing on this tiny thing in my environment. Being with this tiny thing. And seeing how this focus how this thread is allowing me to focus on what we're doing here. And so every time I say that, I think, and so. And so blanket stitch. What else would you like to reveal to us? Ooh, that your width is similar to that of the trail of the red ball. That's interesting. You know, I almost think of myself, what the blanket stitch just revealed to me was that, like, the ball, like, I am the red ball, and even though in one sense, the thread is doing this, right? The thread is being interlocked and wrapped around, and it's going to be enclosed to make a tiny blanket. But this trail of the ball, that's more like my trail, because I am just moving, doing this, right? Sitting on the earth, spinning around the sun. I'm kind of just floating in space, in the cosmos. But that's me. But the blanket stitch is kind of doing that too. And the thread is kind of doing that too. But, that's an interesting to think about our relationship. And like appearances versus like the dance, you know? This is kind of like the pulse, like the ocean. There's a pulse here. And then something is being the conduit. Yeah. So we're getting kind of short now. And as we're getting short, we're gonna flip around to the back here. And I'm gonna go through. I'm gonna tunnel through behind here. And for as long as I can, no need to not. For real. And we pull it out. And now we can clip this. And we haven't gone around all the way, if you didn't notice. We still have this area to do all around here. So check out this sunshine and lizard in relation to these other spirals, because you know we spiral around the sun. And I'm gonna get some more thread here. And so the descending ball, I feel, is like our descending roots. And not only do our roots descend, but we descend into the soils where the roots grow. And the roots are nourished by the soils. The blanket, the grasses, the roots, as the blanket, are nourished by the soils. So this descending red ball will nourish the blanket, but also the blanket will too one day become soil, which will nourish the blanket. And so there's this descending and ascending movement. As I'm creating it, it's moving around. You can see it's ascending, descending, ascending, descending. It's spiraling around. So let us think about how we ascend and descend through our breath, and then also how we ascend and descend in our life. Does our spirit ascend? Does our spirit just continue on after and ascend? And then our body is what descends? I think that it depends on... never mind. I think it depends on what you believe. I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I'm here to listen and to cultivate relationship. So, what parts of us ascend? Or aspects of us ascend? What aspects of us descend? Well, right now, my shadow is descending onto this. This thread, as I pull it, it ascends to a certain degree. Is there anything else? In the quiet motion, in the quiet motion of our hearts. Ooh, we didn't even talk about those blankets that the European settlers gave to the natives and then gave them all smallpox, that other epidemic that happened. And those blankets and that story. Of genocide. So let us think about how this can be medicine and how this can be poison. How ascent and descent can be medicine. How ascent or descent can be poison. I'd love to hear your reflections about that. I think that ascent can sometimes be a way to dominate, control, enslave, exploit people in the more than human world. Because it's like this idea of ascent and descent, it's like there's a harmony to doing that. And so if somebody is just straining to the top of what they believe the top is, then other people are going to be straining down below. And this needs to be brought back into balance. And when we think about culture and the river of culture, something that is flowing, gravity holds the water down, and then through photosynthesis in the trees, the water gets brought back up and ascends back up into the atmosphere, and then it goes back down. And so the grasses are also drinking up this water. This water ascends through the grasses and the plants. That is the blanket. That is one way that a scent moves through the blanket, or the metaphor of the blanket. There is an Irish origin story that was told by Ella Young. That was told by, I think, Alice Kane, written by Ella Young, or the other way around, I'm not sure. But it's an origin story that I read from this book, and it's actually on my YouTube channel, so you can look it up. It's like an Irish creation story or something like that. And it tells the story of Bridget and her sword carving the rivers and the veins of the water and the lakes, carving their beds into the land, and then water coming and filling it up. And sometimes I wonder if there have been dams, and there have been lots of ways that the veins of the water of the earth have been dried up. And when those dry up, then the blankets dry up too, because water is life. And what happens when there's nothing to circulate that back down? What happens when we humans distort that flow? We must, I don't want to speak in terms of what we must do or what we must not do, but we can regenerate those veins. And even by doing this is one way to do that. It's one way, as I am also made up of water, it's one way that the consciousness of water is seeking to do that through me. Okay? So there's that. And then we have our other one. And I'm not sure. I almost want to put a red stitch around this one. Aha. Oh, just to let you know, this blue material was woven in Mexico, and I embroidered the face of the river spirit onto it, and it's a really long blue rectangle, like a shawl. Only it's like twice the length of a shawl. Could be, yeah, here it is on the table. That's my tablecloth. And so she is here, the river is here, and looking at this lizard and seeing where the blue is on this lizard, like the river. And now we're going to move along here to blanket stitching onto our second red ball. So I wonder what dreams will be had under the blanket, all tucked in. How are our dreams related to the soils? I consulted with Stariari, who is a Toltec shaman, and she based on my birth date, she gave me a Toltec astrology reading saying that my night deity is, I think that's what it was, Tlazolteotl, who is a filth eater, purifier. And I think about how those two are in relationship. When those two qualities are in relationship, I think there can be balance, because it's not just one person trying to be pure and thinking their shit is pure. It's like this alchemy. How can one transform? How can one transform filth into purity? Because it's, in that sense, it's not like rejecting the filth. It's actually being responsible for the filth, processing the filth, and transforming the filth. And it's necessary for balance. And so, Tlazolteotl, do you have any wisdom for us? Ooh. Let us listen through our hearts. Abound, unbroken, uncalled for, withheld, derived from the essence of your heart and soul. Amongst us lie the key to the infinite amphibian, and what you know is beyond the realms of the sacred and the profane, but it is carried deep within. Listen as I now rain brightly. Listen as it falls upon the earth at night. For I know how to transform your soul from filth to light. When the earth turns and reaches rising, it is different from when the earth turns and reaches morning. When the earth turns and reaches rising, that is the alchemical process. Genocide is our morning. And so the earth teaches us how to rise. And in that, the earth teaches us how to transform our filth. In any moment, the qualities of rising is the act of facing what it is that we have deemed filthy. And that is all. You face it, and there is no more. No more filth. So it is the things that we neglect that become our filth. Which does not make them filthy, but it reveals that that's what the perception of filth is. And that is how we must rise. Thank you, Tlazotzelotl. Is there anything I must face in this moment? Facing that this blanket has a stain on it. The filth of this stain. The filth of it. Who is that? It is I, the filth maker, spilling all over you, spilling my drunken spirits. Is it? Is it that really? Whose filthy drunken spirits? I'm now thinking of the medicine people and the sovereignty of consciousness and people who carry the medicine, plant medicine, and how different plants have been illegalized, and in that demonized, and in that made to be filthy, made to be seen as filthy. But that is not true, for we know that there are multiple ways of perceiving reality. But it is easier to enslave somebody who does not have the sovereignty of consciousness, who does not enter into that ceremony of medicine. Who demonizes it. And so that is something we must face as well. And to not abuse the medicine, for we know that we must balance between ascent and descent. And that is what the blanket stitch has taught us, or at least has reminded us and given us an outlet to share with you the things that we've learned, aspects of our existence, sharing our ways of knowing, through our own internal dialogue and external as it's reflected with you, as I am a reflection of you. Okay, there's our other one, and we're gonna stop for now. So I want to thank you for tuning in. We want to thank all of our ancestors for guiding us through the process of transformation and all of the elements, for guiding us through the process of this transformation. And with that, we release you and thank you.